Thank you, everybody, for your patience. Appreciate your attendance today. It's a nice, quiet Friday in Canberra, and you've taken time out of your day to be here, so thank you so much. On behalf of the ACT government and local peoples, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today, the Ngunnawal people, and we recognise any other people or families with connection to the lands of the ACT, and we wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture, the contribution that they make to the life of the City of Canberra and the Australian Capital Territory. We'd also like to acknowledge and welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be attending today's event or even viewing it online, because we're going to be recording today's workshop and uploading it for later consumption, especially for those that miss out the workshop. So once again, thank you for attending today. I'm going to hand over to Kristi, and she's going to give you a bit of context about this program, the investment that the authority has made over time, and what you're here to focus on today to put you in the best position for your application. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I feel like it's very formal standing up here speaking to you today, but it's best for, as Maka was saying, for the recording that we'll be doing and sharing it with everybody else. So, as an introduction, my name is Kristi Clark. I am the City Place Manager with the City Renewal Authority. So my role within the team is really that on-the-ground connection to the place experiencing and marketing branch of CRA, City Renewal Authority, and really connected in terms of all of the events and activations and things like that that we are working with our community to implement. So that's where my role really fits in with all of you here today. I'm really excited to actually see faces of all of our creative thinkers and innovators and placemakers in Canberra, because this is the whole idea of the authority, is that it's a very collaborative space with Canberrans or anyone that wants to call themselves a Canberran or be here or work with the city. So to give some context, so Maka's going to be doing a lot of the leading of actually working through this workshop. I'm just going to set the stage with a few bits and pieces around the guidelines that we'll be following and how these grants have come to be. So this is a process that we have been developing over the last 6 years. So it has changed a fair bit from the first few grant rounds that we ran, which tended to be more kind of smaller, a little bit more granular. Some of the guidelines around it were more opaque, and this has come through years and years of feedback from the community, listening to the people that have applied and then also been successful grant recipients, and we've been refining the process to what we're going to deliver you today. So first of all, before I actually kind of step into that, I just want to take a step back and really speak to placemaking as a whole, because it is something that is it's not easily defined, and it's often not something that people would think of first in terms of when there's a creative initiative that they want to bring into a city, but it's actually probably who we think the most important part of it. So what placemaking really is it's designing what we're doing in spaces for the people first, rather than our intention of what we would want it to be, rather than thinking, hey, this would be a great place for a car park and a mall and a train station and a theater. It's actually, well, who uses these spaces? What do the people want? What would be the best for their well-being, their connectivity, how they're interacting as a community, what's actually going to build the community? And then those are the designs, those are the developments, those are the events that we're implementing into those spaces. Come on in. No, it's okay. Welcome. So that's where we really kind of want to shift your mindset in this, and where we would really invite you to come from when you're looking at any ideas that you would like to apply for through this grant process. So it's really thinking about the place first, and we'll walk through these places and the identities that they kind of already hold within what is applicable for the grant round applications. But that's where we're coming from. And again, it's really important because ACT government bodies, there's a number of different grants that are open through Arts ACT, through Events ACT, and things like that. But where the City Renewal Authority Placemaking Grants round really wants you to focus is, how am I doing something that is supporting, shaping, and influencing the people that are using this space and making this space more enjoyable, more of a sense of belonging for anybody that's passing through, whether they live there, visiting, what have you. So I'll jump on, and I realize that I'm going to, do you want me to use any of these slides, Martha, or no? Perfect, I'll just leave it there then. Yeah, great, sweet. So this grant round is a little bit different, hence you're here today, which is fantastic. So this is based on feedback. We wanted to give you guys as much information as possible in terms of guidance of how to apply, what's eligible for application, a little bit more of that brainstorming, sharing questions, because there's usually common questions throughout the room, and also bringing you together can help to, instigate and facilitate some of those collaborations that might be possible with them. So this process is this pitch workshop. So you're going to be developing a pitch in the EOI, the expression of interest process, for these grant rounds. We have divided the grants up to more specific categories this time. This is new. This is something that we have taken on from feedback from last grant rounds, where before it was a little bit more vague and open, saying apply for something that's going to make the city better. And people could be a bit like, oh my God, it's a bit like drinking through a fire hydrant hose with that one, because you're like, where do I start? So you'll see even that we've broken it down into categories in terms of art, events, marketing, which is a little bit of a different one as well too, coming at it from a different perspective, spaces, empty spaces, vacant spaces, and then place in terms of things that would be actually physically living more long-term, semi-permanent or permanent within a space. So we're dividing these up, and that's where Mark will really work with you to answer your questions within those categories. What I'm going to step back again and take a look at that's really important for you to know about what's applicable for your grants that you're going to be putting an EOI in for, hopefully. I hope all of you apply, please, the more the merrier. Is that the funding, and I know it's always kind of, this is the boring bit, but the money's got to come from somewhere for these grants. So the funding for these grants does come through the city centre improvements and marketing levy. So this is why there's going to be quite a firm geographical definition of space of where these programs can be implemented, because that funding is coming from those levy payers within that space to help improve those spaces and market those spaces. Hence why we do have the City Renewal Authority precinct can stretch a bit outside of those boundaries, but for what we're talking about today, it's just within that lovely acronym of CCMIL, levy funded paying area, which is broken down into civic. So it's kind of like the heart of the city. That's really what we would call civic, is that shopping, economic, and entertainment precinct, bars, restaurants, Canberra Centre, City Walk, Garima Place. That's like a real hub right there. Next to it is an area, and this is all in the application forms, so you can see, called City Hill, which is a bit more vague when you're not familiar with it, but it's really the area encompassing kind of right out there when you look at the Legislative Assembly, Civic Square with Legislative Assembly, Canberra, Museum and Gallery, Theatre, City Hill, the Sydney and Melbourne buildings, and that type of precinct. That's more of the cultural precinct, with theatre, museum, all of that type of heart, and a lot of great heritage buildings like the Sydney and Melbourne buildings on the corner of Northbourne and London Circuit. Then we kind of start shifting more into that City West area. This is what we really call that connecting corridor between the civic kind of main kind of pulse bloodline that runs through the city there, and with the light rail connecting to ANU. So it's really a knowledge and business and quite cerebral part of the city, if you'd say that, and it kind of heads towards ANU with that really beautiful connecting space there called Latin American Plaza, which maybe many of you have walked through or seen and had no idea that it was called Latin American Plaza, but that's in that space. So that's another area that we're really looking to focus on in these grants. Then if we kind of shift in the other direction of civic, then we have City East, which is pretty much kind of what we're sitting in right now. And it's that corridor between, Glebe Park, this area down to the civic pool, over to the casino and the convention center. So it's a bit more of a leafy, closer to some of those city residential areas. So it starts as a different feel as you move east from the City Walk main corridor that goes east to west through Civic. So that's really a nature meets business space. And then we kind of go up to head up to Braddon, where we have, it's really an arts and culture precinct, and it's been developing more and more. And that's a real focus there, is to keep building on that environment. And that Braddon precinct leads just right up to Hague Park there, which is kind of separate, but they really speak to each other, Braddon and Hague Park. Hague Park has really been transformed. We've been doing a lot of work with the community over the last few years to change the reputation of that park, which didn't have the most lovely reputation, to be quite frank, to bring more light, more activity, more family involvement, and that is directly right at the edge and the entrance to Braddon. So those are the areas that we're looking at in terms of the city where the funding for these grants is applicable. I don't really want to go into more detail than that. I hope that's a bit of an understanding in terms of the places. The last thing I will share with you before I'll get out of your hair and actually disappear and let Macca just run the show and you guys can share all the questions, because then I'm not supposed to be in the room listening to all your amazing ideas before the EOI process comes in. But what's really important to know is that the City Renewal Authority, we do deliver an annual program that we call it, that encompasses pretty much all of these different themes that you're sitting at different tables that are labeled with that: art, events, places, all of those types of things. The idea with these grants is that we would invite you to either kind of find something that we're already doing in the program that works with it, so there's a nice alignment, or looking at it from the completely other side of it is you see that there's a major gap in a space. There's a gap in programming from an events perspective. There's a gap in art that could be, brought into the public realm. There's a gap in terms of seating infrastructure, something like that. So what we pretty much do throughout the calendar year is we have about 4 or 5 major events that we like to say that happen. So there's Floriade. Obviously, Floriade happens on the other side of Parks Way, but we do a big kind of walking trail to help people get guided from the light rail through the city centre down across the Alara Street footbridge. So there's Floriade that happens in September, October. Another main event that we run is the Christmas in the City kind of campaign to work to dress and beautify the city for Christmas and host events, singing, dancing, all of those good joys of the holiday season. Then in the new year, we have the city centre illuminations as part of the Enlightened Festival. So this is just, again, for you guys to note if you're kind of thinking of planning around these things, which is why I'm sharing with you. So that happens in March. And again, it's in partnership with Events ACT, the big Enlightened Festival, that the home base of it is on the other side of the lake in the Parliamentary Triangle. But yes, in March. Unless my brain is absolutely cross-firing. We do a lot of things and sometimes dates blend. But yeah, that's in March. Usually at the very beginning of March, and it happens around the time as well. March is probably one of the busiest months in Canberra, because you have the Canberra Day public holiday. Weather is good. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. So maybe you're thinking, hey, I want to leverage that opportunity, or I want to stay away from that opportunity if it's maybe saturated with events. I don't know. There's plenty of options. And honestly, there's never enough. I'll just say that as well. I'm not saying, don't do it. There's actually opportunities that happen. If you think there's going to be more people in the city, great. Maybe that's a great time to put on your event at the same time. And then flowing down the kind of last kind of pinned in the calendar main event is the Winter in the City event that we do every year. And that happens, and I should have said, sorry, for Enlighten Illuminations. We tend to have that focused through, again, the Civic Square, which is, again, that square in front of the theatre, legislative, and CMAG. And that will kind of connect into the City Walk civic precinct there, potentially even flowing as far as Garima Place or Glebe Park. And then there's also going back to Winter in the City, and that happens in Civic Square during those winter school holiday programs. So that's our next one coming up. So that one's not really what you're considering for this one, but maybe for the second grant round in the year, it's something you might want to look at. But yeah, so those are the main programs that happen. And then we do a focus of what we call granular activations throughout the year. So smaller things where we're always looking at putting in new artworks, improving of city furnishings, seating, cleaning and greening, more than smaller kind of scale events that might be what we'd call little pops of spontaneous joy, where you don't going to promote, the heck out of it and try and get thousands and thousands of people into one space at one time, but it's adding that love to the city as people kind of walk through and they're spontaneously met with something exciting. And then into other things like strategically trying to promote certain areas with maybe a series of events or artworks, which would maybe go into more of the marketing space. So it's just something that you can consider, that we do have. Most of these things will be available for you to research on the City Renewal Authority website. And you can also ask these questions as well in terms of the existing program that we have or future planning for the next year. So you can try and work with us on that component. So I've just spoken a lot about many things. I hope it hasn't been too much information, but I wanted to give you as much context as possible before you head into more of the workshop space. So does anyone have any questions of me that I might not be able to answer? No? If that's it, enjoy. Don't want to hold you up on Friday any longer. And yeah, can't wait to get your to read your applications as they come through.
Thank you very much, Kristi. Wonderful. And isn't it wonderful to have a representative from the authority give you the specific things to highlight? There's so much information out there. And in fact, let's point to your tables for a minute. So what we've actually done today is we've printed out a copy of today's presentation that I'm about to walk you through. So for those that like to get ahead and read ahead, because that's what you like to do, go ahead, do it. In fact, if you want to go right to the end and look at the tests and see if you can start answering the questions, there's big pieces of white paper right in the middle of the table. If you feel like you can start mapping out your grant program right now, go right ahead. Wendy and I are going to be helping you out throughout this process. So if you need some assistance throughout the process, Wendy and I will be assisting you through that process. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to drag everyone through a presentation process. We want people to move at the pace within which they want to move. Now, a couple of housekeeping matters. It's wonderful to be here in the Innovation Centre today. Just around the corner where you walked in are the bathrooms. So if anybody needs to go to a bathroom and they don't have a pass, put your hand up and Maddie up the back can help you get in and out to the bathroom or any of the other facilities for that matter. Some other housekeeping matters. All of the resources are available on that link. So you're going to get this presentation electronically. You've got it physically in front of you. If you keep going back to that link on the website, more information will keep being uploaded. The workshop is intended to be 2 hours and it's interactive. So we just had a representative, Kristi from the authority, explaining really specific context. Hopefully what that means is you've been able to identify what really matters out of all of the information that's in front of you. But for those that maybe for the first time you're only just hearing about it and you want to understand more, I'll make sure I do the best that I can to walk you through the foundations of this program, hopefully without boring you. So over the next 2 hours or so, we want to spend the majority of that time actually working on a first draft outline of your project. Now, you would have figured out by now that each of the tables are actually divided up into the 5 categories of the grant program. So throughout the process If you feel like you're at the wrong table and you need to go and find the right table, go right ahead, pick your stuff up and go to the right table. At each table, we have some nutrients and bowls, we've got some water, and we've got some free swag from Local Peoples. So Local Peoples is a design studio, and we've been doing placemaking now for quite a while, but we've just launched in Canberra, and the ACT government was gracious enough to invite us to assist with this process. So we owe a considerable amount to the authority, and we thank them for engaging Local Peoples. At Local Peoples, our mission is to use design for good, and our focus is on finding ways to put human beings at the center of that design. And isn't that really what these projects are all about? So this was intended to be the program for the day, but Kristi has done a fantastic job at giving you the broad brushstrokes of the scope of the program. So what I'm going to do, for those that need to understand just a little bit more detail before you can get stuck into your outline, I'll still go through that for you. For those that feel like you're feeling brave and you want to get stuck in, go right ahead and get stuck in and put your hand up if you need some help from either Wendy or myself. Then I'll actually walk through the application process, and at that point, give you some tips about ways to differentiate your application. And after that, will be all yours. So we'll be coming to each of your tables and working with you on developing, hopefully, a killer winning grant application. Right at the end, we'll do a bit of a retrospective to see if there's any lessons that we've learnt, to make sure everybody's on the same page about what the next steps are. Okay, so the scope of the program. The program's a 300 grand program. This is round one. Round one starts from the 1st of August 2023 and finishes on the 30th of June 2024. Now, the objective of this program is to develop and support the vitality of Civic, Braddon, Nacton. So Kristi outlined those areas, and if you jump ahead in the presentation, you'll start to see a map that points to the specific areas. Why are we making such a big deal out of this? Because it's highly likely that the projects that are located within that area are going to be considered as relevant and strong by the application panel. So it's really important that you're mindful of that. The other side of the same coin is that if you feel really strongly about making an application at a location that falls outside that vicinity, you need to be aware of the fact that ratepayers within that vicinity are paying for this. And in that case, you've got to get them over the line. So you have to come up with quite a compelling business case as to why you believe your project is worthwhile funding, notwithstanding the fact that it falls outside that vicinity. Now, we've had a bit of a talk through about what placemaking is, so I'll explain a little bit more about that just to give you some more context. But really, the key outcomes in terms of what's being trying to achieve as an outcome, or the real why, are some key tenets or pillars of outcomes that you really need to be focusing on in your application. And they are innovation, sustainability, and community benefit. Those three pillars need to be three pillars that are ringing in your mind, and you should be asking yourself, is my project delivering innovation, sustainability, and community benefit? So really, that's the what, that's when, that's where, that's how, and that's why. So let's talk about the process. In terms of the timeline, I pointed out the fact that this is the first round. So the second round is going to be the subsequent 12 months. The focus of today's workshop is really about the first part of the application process. There's going to be a second part of the application process. Being successful in that subsequent part leads you then to be delivering and administering and monitoring a project that will go for 12 months. Hopefully that makes sense. The details around that are outlined here in this timeline. And you're right at the review / pitch session stage of this whole process. So thank you, Kristi, for running through just generally what placemaking is all about. Really, the success of placemaking, it can be measured through the degree to which those fundamental tenets are delivered, relating to health, well-being, safety, and especially connection to the people that use these spaces. And so through thoughtful design, what we're hoping to achieve is the funding of projects that effectively deliver a placemaking outcome with those three pillars in mind. Not to drain this once more, but these are the locations, and if you go through the presentation, that's probably the best version of the map. I noticed online that there are a bunch of different versions, but this will probably be the best version for you. So you can recall Kristi outlined City West, Braddon, Hague Park, Civic, City East, and City Hill. The authority is prioritising projects that fall within these boundaries. Now, is there anybody here today that's actually thinking about a project that's outside this current boundary? You are?
I was, because I saw City Renewal Authority.
Aha.
I'm familiar with the boundaries of that.
Okay.
And a need, and I thought, yes, so obviously it won't apply.
That's totally fair, because you're right.
Yeah.
The City Renewal Authority overall boundaries are actually wider. They've narrowed the scope of this particular program just to these territories. And so I'll come and see you, and maybe we can talk about your project.
It's interesting. It's just, yeah.
Yes, indeed. So it's important to know that the reason why there is such a focus is because of what's known as the CCMIL, or the City Centre Marketing and Improvements Levy, as Kristi outlined before. That's a levy that's being paid by all of the residents within that zone. And so essentially, they want to see some sort of a return in projects within the zone within which they belong. And that's the reason why it's important that you highlight the fact that within that zone, if you have great awareness about other projects that are occurring, if you have the support of organisations, residents that are located, businesses that are located, other activities that are located within that zone, it's only going to improve the quality of your application. So in terms of the stakeholders that are involved in this entire program, there are the grant applicants, which hopefully all of you are going to be. And then if you become successful, the project owners. And so they are the funded projects that are successful throughout this two-stage process. The City Renewal Authority is administering the application process. They've also put together a grants panel that's making the specific decision on who's successful and also who's not. And then they are the ones that are administering the delivery and the monitoring of successfully chosen projects. We explained before who the CCMIL ratepayers are, and they're an important stakeholder because they're essentially funding this whole program. And that, of course, we can't forget Canberrans and visitors, or the citizens. And really, it's super important that you identify the cohorts within which this community are going to benefit. And there's specific information on the site, particularly the City Consumer Segmentation Report, that can walk you through the different cohorts within these locations. So it will be really important that your application demonstrates how those cohorts are going to benefit. So that's the who. And we've gone through all of the different factors of the grant program. So there are 5 categories, as we discussed. They're not mutually exclusive. So your program might be predominantly arts, but it also might be an event as well. There's nothing precluding you from, in your application process, ticking both boxes. You can do that. It's important to understand that the authority has restructured this process, especially in this phase after many years of investment, to be focused on bigger thinking, bigger processes, larger programs. Having said that, the intention is that through the momentum built in these larger programs, there will be smaller activation projects that can be considered along the way throughout that particular large project. Okay, so here is, and you'll see in the presentation pack, more granular detail about each category. So for each category, what we've done is we've broken down the goal, the specific objectives, what the grant deliverables are, specific suggestions about the particular location for that category, the relevant audience segment, the relevant engagement of collaboration within that community, recommended measurements, focus on sustainability, because the panel is going to be considering whether this project is just a one-off or whether it's something that will plant a sustainable benefit in years to come. And thankfully, a description of projects within that category that are likely to be supported and projects that are likely not to be supported. So, depending on the table that you're at, go and find the particular page that's relevant to you and really focus in on the detail in that page. That should help to guide you in terms of what you should be prioritizing in your project plan. So I won't drain through these because they'll be relevant based on what you're going for. Okay, a bit about the application process. I've said a couple of times this is a two-step process. You're currently going through the first step. This workshop here today is intended to assist you on your pitch, step one. The pitch leads to an expression of interest. That expression of interest is going to be submitted. And the reason why the authority has divided this into two steps is based upon all of the feedback. I've been informed that this is a better use of time for both applicants and the authority. This way, interested applicants can give a lower bar indication of what they're interested in pitch style, and the authority can provide greater assistance through co-design on helping to shape up these pitches so that they can be more relevant. Then at a point where a subset of successful pitches are chosen, only that subset will be invited to provide a full-blown application, step two. Those that are not successful and do not progress to the next stage will be informed by the authority. Okay, just going to pause there and see if there's any questions about the two-step process. No? Yeah, ish, yep.
The pitch is going to be for how long? It's like 1 minute, 5 minutes, or how many people?
It's a bit of a misnomer. It's not actually going to be a pitch, you standing in front of the panel. Yeah, but essentially the document is structured in such a way that essentially is a pitch. But the panel will be receiving the application through Smarty Grants, and it'll give them a good sense of what you're trying to achieve. And I'll give you some tips at the end of all of this part of the presentation to help you understand how that works.
Just move your mouse because this screen's
Okay. Is there another question? It's not about need, it's about preference and strength of application. Applications that have support from organisations within the locations are going to be stronger applications. Indeed. And you'd be highly encouraged to have that. It will be seen upon as a stronger application in comparison to the other applications. It's quite a competitive process, so we strongly encourage you going ahead and doing your research, doing your groundwork and getting support from members of the community within those locations. So here are the specific dates. The EOI application through Smarty Grants is due on the 2nd of June. Successful applicants will progress through that process, and that process should complete by the 25th of July. Everybody that's successful for the second stage will be notified and start on the 1st of August for a 12-month program. How to apply? So has anybody used Smarty Grants before, or are you familiar with it? Yeah? Okay, cool. That's good. For those that didn't put their hand up, there's actually a preview form in the resource link online. What that is essentially a form you can read through. It's in a PDF, and it shows you exactly the version of the form that's online without you having to jump online and have to register. So you can understand all of the information required for the form, particularly the mandatory information that's required for the form too. I won't drain that today. It's important that you go through that process, and for anyone that has any particular questions about that form, put your hand up and Wendy and I can come and help you with that. Now, if you need support with that application, there is support available. These are the contact details if you need further support, and Local Peoples is here to provide you with any other support. We obviously can't give you indications of success or failure or likelihood thereof, but we can provide you with support that's going to strengthen your application. You can put in a number of applications if you so wish. It's totally up to you. Each application will be measured on its merits, and there's the notion of auspice funding. Let me explain. Essentially, if you've gone through the qualification criteria and you feel like your criteria isn't strong enough, you don't meet it alone, you can engage another organisation that you believe actually meets those criteria and request that they finance you or fund you, and essentially they'll be a co-signatory on your application. And there's a specific box that you need to tick on the Smarty Grants form that will indicate the fact that your application is auspiced. I'm just going to pause there and see if there are any questions about that. It's quite an important point to raise because for many of those that feel like alone they can't meet the criteria, the eligibility criteria, which I'll go through. I haven't yet, but you can jump ahead. It's a couple of pages ahead from where we are if you feel like reading it. I'm about to get there soon though.
It's about like if you don't meet the criteria, but you identify or you identify with an organization, so you can apply to that organization.
It's more that you can go to them and say, hey, can you work with me and partner with me on this application together? You'll be a part of my application. I'll be a part of yours because we'll be together. And that means that you'll still have to tick that box and indicate who that organisation is. Let me say the authority has already explained to us that organisations that do this demonstrate a sign of maturity and awareness of where they're at, and that'll be seen upon as a good indication that you're ready to do this properly. Folks that go ahead that don't necessarily meet the criteria and still progress ahead without actually understanding these nuances, I think they'll be looked upon as perhaps not necessarily ready for this process. So it's an important nuance to understand, and we'll get into the criteria in a sec. All right, let's do that. Yes. Not at all. It could be $1 billion organisation. It could be anybody. In fact, it will be looked upon quite nicely. Yeah, if there's a deep-pocketed organisation you partner with. So there are two aspects to eligibility. There's the eligibility of the applicant, and then there's the eligibility of the project itself. So this table is a good summary of what will be seen as an eligible applicant and characteristics of an ineligible applicant. The applicant can be an individual, a corporation, a non-for-profit organisation. At the end of the day, to be eligible as an applicant, you need to tick all the boxes on the left. If you tick any of the boxes at all on the right, you're ineligible. And in that particular instance, if you want to proceed, then perhaps you might want to seek the partnership of an auspice organisation. Then there's the project eligibility. Separate to you as an applicant, assess your project and determine, based upon the type of project, do you fall within one of the categories? Obviously, if you don't, then you're outside of the scope of the program. Is the project inside an eligible activity area? If it is, great. If it's not, you've got to put forward a pretty compelling case to say why you think your project's worthy. Providing a good indication of the project costs. You can go as granular as you like. You don't have to. You can provide a high-level summary of the project costs and a budget. Don't have to go to significant granularity around that, but if you do, it'll be looked upon kindly. And those that take the time to go through the audience segments, and particularly the detail around those audience segments, and show how those projects are actually benefiting those segments, those applications are going to go quite well. So for any projects where the authority considers that the primary purpose of that project is to be political, or the authority considers that that project denigrates or excludes part of the community or has an adverse effect on public health, safety, the environment, or heritage, that project will be ineligible. Also, within projects, project costs that are ineligible, i.e. funds will not be able to cover, include business establishment fees, core business support, general admin and management costs associated with the operations of the organisation separate to the project, legal costs that are considered to be business as usual for that organisation separate to the project, any office equipment, donations, professional development or study tours, and requests for retrospective funding. If you have any doubt about your cost category, whether that makes your project ineligible, just understand that your project itself can be eligible, but that cost won't be covered by the funding application, if that makes sense. And if you have any questions about that, put your hand up and I'll come and help you out for your application. So you've put your application in, it's now in front of the committee for evaluation. If your pitch meets the application criteria, it's been correctly submitted through Smarty Grants, the project's high quality, and that's also in comparison to all of the other applications, then the authority is likely to send you an invitation to progress to step 2 for the full-blown application. The grants panel is a minimum 3-person assessment panel that assesses EOI pitches and provides a recommendation to the CEO. The panel comprises representatives from the authority, relevant government agencies, directorates, external stakeholders, and also those levy payers within that location scope. As I mentioned before, projects that focus on innovation, sustainability, and community benefit will be looked on kindly. And in particular, projects that focus on diversity and inclusion will also be looked on kindly. And that could be consulting with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community or advisory groups, working with called people to develop a communication strategy, considering other options for providers that employ people living with a disability. These are just some examples of ways to increase the level of diversity and inclusion of your project. Are there any questions? Yes.
The inclusion on that panel of people who have the relevant authorities as culturally diverse?
That's a good question.
Because I think that has to be mandatory. If the authority doesn't do that, I think you will have issues with people from those backgrounds. So the authority needs to make a clear statement about that.
Okay, did everyone hear that statement that was made? I think it's quite a valid statement. That's a statement that I'll take to the authority and take up with them to make sure that they can confirm and come back to you. We've got your contact details. We'll make sure we contact you personally and also distribute that to everybody else as part of the FAQs. Yes?
Yeah, I was going to that question. Thanks for that question. But for the first piece, you say that's 3 people panel assessment or minimum for that. So those people, where they can?
They're going to come from representatives from the authority, relevant government agencies, directorates, external stakeholders, and will also include levy payers. It's just in the first box there in the paragraph there. That's the list. Yeah. Yes.
What's the breakdown in the levy payers between businesses and authorities and lessees, like private residential?
Another great question. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I'll take that question away and provide an answer to that question after today's workshop.
That's a very diverse group. Again, the assessment, the person representing that group in the assessment panel is to be able to represent the diversity.
Indeed. I suppose at the end of the day, it's a question of fact. What is indeed the mix of representation within the locations? I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head, but I will take that away and find out the answer. Well, we are looking at the city centre, so that would be more likely, you would imagine. So it would not be surprising if that were the case. There are some more questions. Yes. That's correct. All can apply, indeed. And all will be treated equally based upon the merits of the application. Yes. Are you referring to this detail here in the audience segment for the art category? Yet? This is one sentence that cross-references the wider descriptions of the segment. If you read through the greater detail around those segments, it might be more revealing about the level of representation and inclusion. So it might be worthwhile going through that. And that's the reason why I emphasize the importance of reading through that specific reference. That reference can be found at the bottom of page 12. It's right there. There's a resource list right at the end, key resources. It's also there too. And those links go directly back to the website that explains all of the information. It's a downloadable PDF, quite detailed. There was a consulting organisation engaged to deliver that report, and there's a significant amount of information on each of the segments. So very difficult to provide a summary of all of the information on one page. Perhaps it's not fully representative of all of the information. if that makes sense. No problems. Were there any other questions? Yes.
Just in the, I think it'd be useful for the authority to say why, sort of condense that report down and say, why are seniors and people with disabilities and mature age people excluded from that group? Because presumably those three groups of people are going to be using those spaces, not just young aspirers.
Sure.
And so I think you've really got to look at that. I mean, it would be, you know.
Let me just jump to an example.
Yeah.
Let's take space. Oh no, you're at the art.
Yeah.
So look, again, this is really representative. None of the suggestions here are exclusionary of any alternatives. They're indications by the authority about what the authority believes based upon research and demographic information, traffic, and also their desire for particular segments to attend a particular location and attractions and location. So there has been a considerable amount of effort and research conducted that comes behind that. Notwithstanding that, it's still important that members of the community, just like yourself, perhaps provide other perspectives. Because it's only through the ability to provide these diverse perspectives can we really rationalise the veracity of maybe what really could be represented, what's really needed and in demand at a particular location. So from that perspective, I absolutely agree with you. If you feel strongly that, you know, really there is a different segment that might benefit, and I see authority that you've recommended a different segment, but I truly believe my project that will benefit this other segment is for all of these reasons. You might actually differentiate yourself in comparison to the other applicants and find yourself in a really advantageous situation. And that's part of some of the advice and coaching that I'm here to give. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I just think, you know, not referencing those other groups in the already segment is a big mistake.
I can tell you it's really just a matter of, on a slide on a page, trying to provide a summary. There is considerably more information behind this. It was really more for condensing and conveniently explaining the information today. But please do your research, because it's, as you do more research in the layers underneath this, you'll discover that there has been considerable investigation. Are there any other questions? Sorry. Yes. Yes. So I'll qualify my answer by saying I can't provide you with financial advice. But what I can say to you is, if the nature of the expenditure in your project plan, in your budget, attracts a GST charge, you have to be registered for GST, is what I understand. Does that give you an indication? Without giving you any advice. Okay, great. Were there any other questions? Nope. Okay, cool. I'm hoping that everybody's just jumping ahead because you understand the detail and you're getting stuck into your big white pages and mapping out your project plan, because we're going to get to that in a sec. All right. Now, if you've gotten through all of that detail, I believe this is one of the key areas that you need to pay attention to. The panel is going to be assessing all of the pitches proportionally according to this distribution. So these weightings are going to be material, and so it is encouraged that your pitch is weighted accordingly. Meaning that if you've emphasized a significant part of your pitch more so that isn't consistent with these weightings, you may potentially be costing yourself further explanation on another weighting, and therefore, on the aggregate, penalizing yourself in your pitch. Just going to pause there and see if that makes sense. This is, what page is that? Page 26. This is a really important point because there is so much information, and as you're having fun with this process, thinking big, dreaming about your project, it's easy to allow yourself to get away with your pitch. It's important and good discipline to shape your pitch according to the weightings in this table. And so this table looks like a pretty good structure and guide or a tick box checklist for your pitch application. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so you've done your pitch, you've listened to everything we've discussed today, the authority has come back and said, fantastic, you're shortlisted. You then go through the process and Local Peoples helps you through the detailed application process. And then after stage 2, after that next step, the authority comes back and says, congratulations, you've been selected. On the 1st of August, the project kicks off. What that means is that at that point, you'll be entering into a deed of grant and there'll be some instructions involved in that process. Normally it takes about 30 days for the ACT government to register you if you're not already in their system. And all successful projects that go for that 12-month period or that occur any time within that 12-month period are usually broken up into 5 milestones. And they're the 5. So why am I making a big point about this and speaking slowly? Because maybe it will be important in your pitch to break up your delivery phases according to those 5 milestones if it's relevant. Hopefully that makes sense. Yep. All right, we're getting to the breakout session, so any questions, do not hesitate to ask. All right, so what Local Peoples has done is we've scoured through all of the material and found some of the edge type of questions that maybe people were afraid to ask, maybe people didn't realize, or maybe things that need to be brought to the forefront. On this slide, slide 28, these frequently asked questions are good to take a note of because they might answer a question that you had in the process of putting your grant application together. Is there a design fee to be paid when you get to the full application phase? No. Can an application include involvement from anyone in the public? Yes. Actually, it's encouraged. Can you see examples of previous grants that are successful? Yes. Actually, it's encouraged that you investigate previous grants. The link to those previous grants is right there. What costs are required for the EOI pitch? Required, just the high-level costings. But obviously those costings that are more detailed, a bit more information, are going to be looked upon kindly. Can I discuss my pitch with somebody before submitting? Absolutely. There's an email for you to reach out to the authority, ask any questions that you might have at that email. Can an application be made for a structure or lighting in the public realm? Yes, it can. If you choose to do so, you have an added onus upon you to consider the safety of that structure, and it's quite important that you detail that out. Can the authority provide help for the delivery of your program? Well, really, the authority's purpose is to administer the program. They're not there to deliver it for you. So it's important that they provide you with guidance. You're responsible for the delivery of your project. And when should I get auspiced funding? The guidance is auspice funding should be made available. You should seek it if you feel like, as an applicant, you don't meet the criteria, or in terms of your project, you don't meet the criteria. And so with an auspice funding organisation, you would. That's probably a good scenario. Okay, so that's all of the key detail regarding the scope of the program and the application process. I'm going to pause right there and see if there are any questions. And then if there aren't, let's get stuck into some of the tips. Yes?
How long do you want projects to last? Specific dates or after months?
There is no fixed requirement for a project to last for an amount, as long as the project completes within the time frame of the 12 months. And the 5 milestones is a really good guide. However, there will obviously be events that are one-off things. Notwithstanding that, there is a process by which you need to stand that event up. So it's important to consider the whole process. Yes, there's a question up the back. Stated before, you can put multiple applications, one event each, or you can put one application of a series of related events that all meet a specific outcome because it makes sense. Up to you on how you want to approach it. And if you want some coaching on that, I'm about to come out there and help everybody. Any other questions? Yes?
So Me and the people that are quite new to, maybe new to this, outside of this workshop, if, we need just extra guidance, I send it to you to make sure that we are heading in the right direction and not spending too much time over some parts of the application over others.
Coaching?
Yeah, is there someone that we can talk to?
Me? Yeah. My contact details are at the end of the handout. You've also got the authority in the email there for any of those generic questions that you might want to send to the authority. Indeed. And in fact, it's encouraged because that's a good demonstration of the qualification of your project. Obviously, the authority will not indicate to you about the likelihood of success or failure of your project, but they will be able to answer the question to the best of their ability. Oh, wow. As part of the co-design process, there is a feedback form that was part of the booking of today's event. Please do fill out all of the information and any further questions that you feel better to be in written form. We'll take all those questions away and bring them to the authority for them to review and try to get the answers back to everybody. Yes? You'll be given a notification. The degree to which you'll be given information as to why I can't be certain of, but there should be some indication as to why. So you should have at least a level of indication as to why you weren't successful. But obviously, no comparative information other than to say other applicants were stronger, higher quality, etc., etc. But it'll be probably important for you then to go back to the detail in this pack to then start to re-examine and rethink in the light of day. Where was it that we didn't go? And if you really feel like you've ticked all the boxes, then the brakes, it's a competitive process. So there's only so much money to give out. Yes? The only limit that's been expressed so far is that there's $300,000 available and that the projects desire to be large.
No, I meant if everyone is submitting.
I heard you. That's the answer. I suppose what I'm saying to you is there is no express limit of the number of applications. Obviously, if there are 1 million applications, then the word got around pretty well. I can tell you that the authority did the best that it could, but there are certain areas within the community that could maybe got the word out to. And I encourage everybody here that if you feel like there are others that could benefit from applying for these grants and have a really good idea to stand up, please do. And be very mindful of other applicants that come from diverse backgrounds. I think that's quite important.
And at the time of selection for the application, is it categorized as, let's say, two applications of pitches for the art category and 2 applications for the space category?
No, not at all. It's more about the merits of the application, not a predetermined volume per category. Remember, the categories are not mutually exclusive. So some projects may very well tick a number of categories. So no, there's no predetermined number for categories. Any questions before we get into some of the tips? Nope. All right. So there are 5 key tips that local peoples would like to give to you today regarding your pitch. First of all, think big. It's important for you to demonstrate that you are thinking big and that what you're doing is thinking about scale and the scale of impact and the benefit, especially across those 3 pillars. Do your homework. If you've done your research across other prospective collaborators, the audience segments that we referred to a number of times, any evidence that you've done this before or any existing evidence that what you're proposing will work, any previous research grants that demonstrate why this project is similarly qualified as a result, anything that can demonstrate the veracity of your application and your pitch, include it. Answer the exam questions. The exam questions are there for a reason. The authority is looking to ensure that you meet the minimum eligibility requirements of the process. Make sure you go out of your way to demonstrate why, because the more ease you give to the authority regarding the exam questions, the quicker your process will be your application will be processed, and the more ease and satisfaction the authority will feel in reviewing your application. Go above and beyond. Demonstrate why your project is different. Why is it innovative? Why is it better? Why is it impactful? Why is it diverse or inclusive? Make sure you make a good point about the fact that your project stands out individually above the others in the context of what else is out there. Include any supporting information. Go out there and get letters of recommendation and support from members from the levy cohort or members from the specific cohort segments that support what you're trying to achieve, because all of that context and support matters. It demonstrates that there is wider support for what you're trying to do. Here's an important one. Include a risk management strategy. That demonstrates a level of maturity around you and your organization being a safe pair of hands in being able to manage the inevitable challenges that will befall you over the 12-month period. If you have good foresight about what those challenges will be and a strategy for how you'll deal with those challenges, you'll be able to demonstrate to the authority a level of maturity that shows trust. And that's a good sign for the authority. And finally, have some fun. This is supposed to be a fun process, and notwithstanding all of the onerous requirements that we've outlined here, once you get the hang of it and you find ways to do what you're passionate about, surely that is the meaning of having fun in life. Really, it's important for you to consider a structure. And this is the point at which I hope everyone that's jumped ahead, or if you haven't, I'm watching you all reach out for the big white piece of paper in the center of the table, looking at this bullet point list as an indication of the structure of what you need to address for your project. So look at the category that your project belongs to. What are the objectives that you're trying to achieve, and how does that then relate to the objectives of the program and the stakeholders of the program? What's the specific location and why? What is the budget that you have? What is your delivery plan, including risk management plan? And what is the level of experience that you have in doing this? And what's the degree of support that you have from within the community that says that they want this too? We really recommend that you tailor your pitch as much as you possibly can so that it stands out, because again, it's a competitive process. And in our experience, those pitches that stand out, the ones that are really memorable, are usually the ones that, as long as they answer the exam questions and do all the things we've discussed, they're usually the ones that get up. Okay, well, as I've said before, it's not a literal pitch. You're not going to be sitting in front of a Shark Tank panel going for some sort of oratory exercise. It's still a document that you'll be submitting on Smarty Grants, but maybe it might do well for you to imagine, what is it like, what would it be like if I were in the shoes of that panel? And if I were actually to stand up and pitch this thing, how could I make it compelling so that I can translate the passion, the desire, and the drive that I feel and get that into the application? So if you didn't already know, this is Dr. Wendy. She's a successful applicant in the past, and in fact, applied for a smaller grant, and that grant grew and other processes grew, and she has considerable proven experience in this process. From a local people's perspective, and actually it was Dr. Wendy that explained this to me, there is a difference between being a subject of the narrative that you are potentially a victim of, or a storyteller that determines your destiny. And in large part, that has to do with having a positive mindset. Mindset matters. And really, a positive mindset can translate and leap off that page. So it's really important that you get your story straight, get your story right, because storytelling from a pitching perspective is often, more often, the most effective mechanism that determines the difference between success and failure in our experience. All right, so really, these were the formative, detailed elements of the scope of the program, the application process, and some key tips from local peoples about this whole process. This is the point now in the workshop where we're going to spend time with you, one-on-one, to go through your application projects. Now, if you need to go because you're time poor and you've got other things that you need to do, no problems at all. You've got lots of information that you can take away with you. And I'm just going to point out at each of your tables, there's some local people swag. We have some journals, articles from Matters, our publication that we release quarterly hard copy, monthly electronically, and some cards for you if you want to get into some co-design activities. Take that away with you. Take pretty much everything away except for the crockery and the glasses and the bowls and so on, and maybe leave the tables and the chairs too. But really, there's some gifts here for you to take away so that you can do some further research. Really important for you. Contact details there for the authority, and also local people's information there as well for you to contact for some coaching and continued guidance throughout this process. Everyone knows it's hard, but it's also fun too. And if you like this process, you get used to it, you get to a point where you can get motivated. It can be a worthwhile process. This is the point at which we now are going to break down. And for those that need some coaching and one-on-one assistance, Dr. Wendy and I are here for you. Please raise your hand and grab our attention, and we'll do our best to balance ourselves out across the room. Otherwise, for those that need to go, thank you so much for your time and attention today. It's very much appreciated. On behalf of the authority and local peoples, thank you for your time, and hopefully this has been a worthwhile process and workshop for you. Thank you.